Repeat. This is Talon actual to all points. Comms check, over. Static crackled, then a voice cut through, distorted by the depth. Talon, this is lookout. Signal weak but readable. Tracking your team on thermal. 4 signatures moving southwest along the main tunnel. Over. Roger that, lookout. Maintaining course. We're at... Captain Luka Petrovich paused to check his wrist-mounted GPS, the weak signal struggling beneath tons of earth and concrete. Grid reference Kilo 73. Depth approximately 60 meters. Tunnel integrity holding. ETA to objective, 17 minutes. The LED headlamps cut weakly through the dust-choked air, creating halos around the 4-man team as they navigated the cramped passage. The NATO Engineering Corps had mapped these tunnels extensively before sending in the retrieval team, but maps couldn't capture the weight of history pressing down on them. Tunnels beneath tunnels, trenches beneath trenches. Sarajevo was built on its dead. Captain, take a look at this. Lieutenant Harrow's Boston accent bounced off the stone walls as he directed his light toward a section of tunnel that transitioned from modern concrete to ancient brickwork. These aren't Austrian fortifications. These are older. Talon actual, be advised, the radio squawked suddenly. We're picking up a temperature fluctuation in your vicinity. Ambient dropping 3 degrees. Over. Specialist Belluni, their ground-penetrating radar tech, tapped his equipment. Captain, I'm getting feedback loops. Signals bouncing strangely, like the tunnel ahead isn't empty. Define not empty, specialist. Belluni's dark eyes narrowed at his display. I can't. Readings inconsistent with soil, stone, or metal. Density's all wrong. It's shifting. Their 4th man, Corporal Vasco, the team's demolitions expert, had been silent the entire mission. He'd served 3 prior rotations clearing ordnance in the region. Now he stopped abruptly, raising a closed fist, the universal military signal to halt. The team froze. You hear that? Vasco whispered. In the perfect stillness of the tunnel, a sound drifted toward them. So faint it might have been imagination. A whisper, then several, overlapping in a discordant chorus that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. Reverb from the surface, Harrow suggested, but his hand had already dropped to his sidearm. Negative, Petrovich replied, his Serbian accent thickening with tension. Surface is quiet tonight. Lookout would have reported activity. The radio crackled to life. Talon, this is Lookout. Be advised, we're now reading 5 thermal signatures in your location. Repeat, 5 signatures where there should be 4. Can you confirm additional personnel? Over. The team exchanged glances, headlamps casting stark shadows across suddenly rigid faces. Negative, Lookout, Petrovich replied, his voice steady despite the cold sweat forming at his temples. Team still 4 strong. No additional personnel. Possible equipment malfunction on your end? Over. A pause. Too long. Negative, Captain. Thermal is functioning within parameters. 5th signature is anomalous. Temperature reading significantly below human norm. Signal appears to be behind your position now. Moving. Unusually. Over. The whispering grew louder, still indecipherable, but unmistakably there. A susurration of voices rising and falling like distant waves. Corporal Vasco raised his light toward the tunnel behind them. The beam illuminated only empty passage. Look out, we'll investigate and report, Petrovich said, signaling his team to defensive positions. Continue monitoring. Over. Roger, Talon, be advised. Static erupted, words fragmenting. Signal now showing. Multiple, smaller heat signatures, branching, like... The radio died with a squeal of feedback that matched, for one horrifying moment, the pitch of the whispers surrounding them. And then the sound changed. No longer whispers, but a single keening note, high and piercing. A sound no human throat could make. Captain, Belluni said, voice barely audible. The tunnel map shows a chamber ahead, unmarked. And sir, he swallowed hard. The GPR is showing hundreds of small, hollow spaces in the walls, all around us. Harrow played his light across the ancient brickwork. His beam caught something white protruding from the mortar between stones, something curved and yellowed with age, a fragment of human jawbone. The walls weren't made of brick at all. Captain Petrovich's training superseded his instinct to retreat. 16 years of military discipline didn't break, even as his mind processed what his eyes refused to accept. "Defensive perimeter now," he ordered, voice level despite the rapid drumbeat in his chest. "Harrow, take point. Belluni, continue scanning. Vasco, watch our 6. The team moved with practiced efficiency, forming a diamond pattern in the narrow space. Their light swept the walls, revealing more bone fragments embedded in what they'd mistaken for mortar, femurs, ribs, smaller finger bones arranged in meticulous patterns between ancient stones. "Captain, I need to document this," Belluni said, already reaching for his field camera. The specialist had joined NATO's engineering corps from archaeological preservation. "These aren't random remains. This is deliberate construction." "Document quickly," Petrovich replied. "Priority remains mission objective." Their objective, officially, was recovering sensitive equipment from a collapsed NATO monitoring station established during the Bosnian conflict. Unofficially, Petrovich's team had been specifically selected for anomalous recovery operations. This wasn't their first encounter with the unexplained, but something felt different. Wrong. Harrow kept his rifle at low ready, the tension in his shoulders betraying his casual tone. "Lookout said the 5th signature was behind us, sir." "I'm not seeing anything." "Radio check," Petrovich ordered, pressing his comm unit. "Lookout, this is Talon Actual. Status report, over." Nothing but static. "Comms degradation is consistent with increased depth," Belluni offered, though his expression suggested he didn't believe it. "Or signal interference from the mineral composition of these walls." "These aren't natural formations," Vasco said suddenly, breaking his habitual silence. The demolitions expert ran a gloved hand over the nearest section of wall. "The bone is load-bearing. Someone built this. Someone who knew what they were doing." A sharp crack echoed through the tunnel. All 4 men froze, weapons raised. "What was that?" Harrow whispered. Another crack, louder this time, followed by a grinding sound that originated somewhere beneath their feet. Loose soil shifted between the stones, filtering down like fine rain. "Structural integrity compromised," Petrovich concluded. "Move forward, double time." They advanced deeper, the path narrowing until they moved in single file. Harrow first, then Belluni, Petrovich, and Vasco guarding the rear. The GPR continued to emit erratic readings, its display flickering between normal scans and chaotic patterns. "Sir," Belluni called back, "these readings make no sense. The tunnel walls are showing as both solid and porous, and there's movement within them." "Rodents?" Harrow suggested. "No," Belluni said. "Too organized. Too synchronized." The tunnel suddenly opened into a chamber approximately 8 meters in diameter. Their lights played across the curved walls, illuminating a macabre gallery. Hundreds, no, thousands of human skulls had been arranged in concentric circles, facing inward. Smaller bones formed patterns between them. Spirals, whorls, and what looked disturbingly like musical notation. "Holy Christ," Harrow breathed. "This is a mass grave." "No," Vasco corrected, holstering his weapon to examine the nearest section of wall. "A mass grave is where you dump bodies. This is architecture, art." His fingers traced the pattern of vertebrae that wound between the skulls. "Like nothing I've ever seen." Petrovich surveyed the chamber methodically, noting 3 additional tunnels branching outward. "Belluni, can you get a reading on which path leads to our objective?" The specialist consulted his equipment, frowning. "Sir, I'm getting stronger readings from that direction. He pointed to the leftmost tunnel, but it's not consistent with our target. It's organic, dense, and it's registering thermal fluctuations. Lookout mentioned temperature drops, Harrow reminded them. Check your watches and thermometers. Each man confirmed what they already sensed. The ambient temperature had fallen from 12 degrees Celsius to 7 degrees Celsius in the past 10 minutes. "Captain," Vasco said quietly, "something isn't right about these skulls." "Elaborate, Corporal." Vasco pointed his light at the nearest row. "No mandibles. Every skull is missing its jaw." He moved his beam to another section. "And no eye orbits. They've been filled in with something." Balloony approached cautiously, camera in hand. "That's not fill material," he said after a moment of examination. "The bone has grown over the orbital cavities, like these people were born without eyes." A low vibration hummed through the chamber, so subtle they felt it through their boots before they heard it. The sound gradually rose in pitch until it became a single, clear note. "It's coming from the left tunnel," Harrow said, raising his rifle. "No," Vasco contradicted, turning slowly in place. "It's coming from the walls." The notes split into harmonics, dissonant tones layering over each other. The skulls, hundreds of them, began to vibrate in response, producing a sound like distant, muffled voices. "We're leaving," Petrovich decided. "Alternative route to the objective. Now." The sound abruptly ceased. In the sudden silence, a noise worse than the eerie chorus, a wet, organic scraping, emerged from the leftmost tunnel. The scratch of something heavy being dragged across stone. Harrow trained his light and weapon on the tunnel entrance. Movement, 20 meters in closing. Petrovich made a tactical decision. "Center tunnel, move out." As they repositioned, Balloony gasped. His GPR screen displayed dozens of heat signatures within the walls of the chamber, small, clustered points of warmth, like stars in a constellation. "Sir," he whispered, "the skulls are alive." The dragging sound grew louder. A clicking, chitinous scrape accompanied it now. "Go!" Petrovich ordered, ushering his men toward the center passage. Harrow, last to withdraw, kept his weapon trained on the left tunnel entrance. His light caught something emerging, a mass of bone-white segments, jointed and flowing like a pale river. At its front, a skull larger than the others, jawless and eyeless like its brethren, but moving with horrible purpose. Behind it, more skulls followed, connected by a backbone that shouldn't exist, that couldn't support such a structure. Dozens of heads fused into a serpentine column that undulated across the chamber floor. Harrow fired 3 controlled shots. The rounds struck the lead skull, chipping bone, but causing no apparent damage. "Fall back!" Petrovich shouted, grabbing Harrow's vest and pulling him into the center tunnel as the creature lunged forward with impossible speed. The last thing Petrovich saw before the tunnel curved was the bone centipede flowing into the chamber like liquid death, each skull vibrating with that same terrible song. They ran, the keening harmony pursuing them through the darkness. The central tunnel narrowed as they ran, forcing them into a hunched single-file retreat. Petrovich took rear position, his light sweeping behind them for signs of pursuit. "Clear?" Harrow called back, leading their escape. "Negative," Petrovich replied, his voice tight. "Movement behind us, distance unknown. Acoustic distortion, making it difficult to gauge." The singing had stopped, replaced by that awful scraping sound, bone on stone, multiplied and echoing until direction became impossible to determine. "How the fuck do we kill that thing?" Harrow's question betrayed the first crack in his professional demeanor. "Unknown," Petrovich answered. "Bullets ineffective. Maintain distance. Find defensible position." Balloony, sandwiched between Harrow and Vasco, consulted his GPR screen as he moved. "Captain, this tunnel branches 100 meters ahead. 3 pathways. Radio check, Petrovich ordered. Vasco tried his comms unit. Look out, this is Talon 3. Emergency situation developing. Request immediate guidance. Over. Nothing but static answered. No comms, sir. We're too deep. The tunnel suddenly widened into a small antechamber. Ancient timbers reinforced the ceiling, remnants of Austrian engineering from the Great War, blackened with age but still holding. Defensive position, Petrovich decided. Harrow, proximity charges. The lieutenant unclipped 2 motion-sensitive mines from his gear, quickly configuring them. Non-lethal, sir? Or full payload? Full payload. If we can't kill it, we'll bury it. While Harrow set the charges in the tunnel they just exited, Belluni studied the chamber. Sir, these are different construction techniques, newer. This was a military position, probably from 1916. Vasco nodded agreement, indicating the rotted wooden ammunition boxes in one corner. Austrian forward supply depot. They used existing catacombs and expanded them during the war. What would they be supplying this deep? Harrow asked, returning from setting the charges. Not what. Who? Vasco's light played across faded markings on the wall. German text, barely legible beneath a century of decay. Sonderabteilung Karst. Special Section Karst. Petrovich recognized the designation. The Empire's wartime archaeological division. Grave robbers with academic credentials, Belluni added. They collected artifacts across occupied territories under the guise of preservation. A proximity alert chimed softly from Harrow's detonator. Motion in the tunnel, sir. 20 meters and closing. Options? Petrovich demanded, surveying the 3 exits. Belluni checked his GPR. Left tunnel ascends toward the surface. Right descends deeper. Straight ahead appears to maintain current depth. Surface route, Petrovich decided. Move out. As they entered the left passage, the charges detonated with a muffled thump that sent vibrations through the surrounding stone. Dust and debris billowed from the tunnel entrance. That should slow it down, Harrow said, not sounding convinced. The passage inclined upward at a 15-degree angle. The rough-hewn steps cut directly into bedrock. Their paces quickened with the promise of ascent, the psychological comfort of moving toward the surface. Belluni, monitoring his equipment as they climbed, suddenly stopped. Sir, there's... A cracking sound erupted from the tunnel walls. Hairline fractures appeared in the stone, spreading like lightning across the surface. Keep moving, Petrovich ordered. The cracks widened. Small fragments of bone, finger joints, teeth, orbital fragments began pushing through, forcing their way out of the stone like pale insects emerging from soil. Jesus Christ, Harrow whispered. The whole mountain is bones. A section of wall collapsed inward, revealing a cavity filled with a writhing mass of skeletal remains. Not arranged in patterns now, but moving, flowing, coalescing into partially formed appendages that reached toward the team. Run! Petrovich shouted, abandoning tactical movement. They sprinted up the incline, boots slipping on the ancient steps. Behind them, the tunnel walls continued to disintegrate, revealing more cavities filled with animate bone. 50 meters to the next chamber, Belluni called out, checking his scanner as he ran. Small bone fragments skittered across the floor, moving against gravity, flowing uphill in their direction. Harrow stomped one, a cluster of vertebrae linked by invisible connective tissue, and it shattered, only to reform seconds later. The tunnel abruptly ended at a brick wall. Dead end, Harrow reported, pressing his palms against the obstruction. Recent construction, different material. Vasco examined it quickly. Soviet-era concrete behind the brick. This was sealed deliberately. Breaching charge? Petrovich asked. The demolitions expert shook his head. Risk of collapse is too high. The surrounding structure is compromised. He pointed to the fracturing walls, where more bone fragments were emerging. Alternative? Petrovich demanded. Balloony checked his scanner. We can double back 20 meters. There's a narrow passage branching east, not on any official maps. Behind them, the bone fragments had collected into a rippling carpet that advanced slowly up the incline. From within the exposed wall cavities, incomplete skeletal hands reached outward, fingers clicking against each other in a rhythm that matched the distant whispers now returning. East Passage, Petrovich ordered. Move! They retreated carefully past the living bone carpet, which parted around their boots like water, then closed ranks behind them. The side passage Balloony had identified was barely visible, a crack in the wall that might have been mistaken for structural damage. Single file, worst squeeze first, Petrovich directed. Harrow, the smallest, went first, turning sideways to slip through the narrow opening. It widens after 2 meters, he called back. Doable. Balloony followed, then Vasco, who barely fit despite removing his tactical vest. Petrovich, watching the bone fragments collecting into larger forms behind them, went last. The passage opened into a space so unexpected that all 4 men froze in shock. They stood on a metal catwalk that spanned a vast underground chamber. Steel support beams, rusted but intact, held up sections of the ceiling. Electric cables, long dead, snaked along the walls. Below the catwalk, concrete flooring stretched to industrial machinery, whose purpose wasn't immediately apparent. This is Cold War era, Vasco noted. Soviet military engineering. What were they doing down here? Harrow asked. Balloony trained his light on a far wall, revealing row upon row of metal storage lockers. Many stood open, their contents long removed. Others remained sealed with padlocks now frozen with corrosion. Sir, he said quietly, I believe this was a containment facility. A single locker in the center of the room had been torn open from the inside, its metal door peeled outward like paper. Containment for what? Harrow asked. The whispers returned, louder now, emanating from the passage behind them. As one, they turned to see bone fragments flowing through the crack, assembling themselves into a skeletal approximation of a human hand. Petrovich raised his rifle. We need to find another exit. Now. Tactical lights only, Petrovich ordered as they moved deeper into the Soviet facility. Their headlamps cast long shadows across abandoned workstations and rusted equipment. Sir, I've got something, Balloony called from a control panel. He'd connected his tablet to an ancient terminal, bypassing corroded wiring. This place was designated Object 47B, Soviet Military Research Facility, active from 1962 to 1988. Research on what? Harrow asked, covering the passage they'd entered through. The skeletal hand had withdrawn, but the whispers persisted. Working on translation, Balloony replied, his fingers moving across his device. My Russian is limited, but these files mention acoustic resonance and osseous manipulation. Vasco had been systematically checking exit routes. 2 potential extraction paths. Maintenance shaft in northeast corner, leads up approximately 80 meters. Service tunnel south, horizontal trajectory, unknown terminus. Petrovich considered their options. Balloony, what else can you tell me about this facility? They were studying something they found during tunnel expansion, something they called... He paused, frowning at his translation. The closest term is bone singer, or choir of bone. A metallic clang echoed from the passage they'd used to enter, then another, closer. It's coming through, Harrow warned, backing away from the entrance. Maintenance shaft, Petrovich decided. Vertical ascent toward surface. Go. They crossed the catwalk to the northeastern corner, where a metal ladder disappeared into a circular shaft above. As Harrow prepared to climb first, Balloony made a final download from the terminal. Sir, I've got facility schematics and partial research logs. Bring them, move. Harrow ascended 10 meters before calling down. Shaft is clear, but there's damage. Rungs missing in sections. Acknowledged. Proceed with caution, Petrovich replied. As Balloony prepared to follow, something caught his attention on a nearby workbench. Captain, you need to see this. Reluctantly, Petrovich approached. Under Balloony's light lay a collection of artifacts carefully arranged on a faded cloth. Bone fragments carved with intricate patterns, smaller than those in the tunnels, but unmistakably similar. They were studying samples, Balloony whispered, trying to replicate the construction techniques. Why? The acoustic properties. He indicated a series of photographs showing sound wave patterns. These bones resonate at frequencies that affect human neural activity. They were weaponizing it. A crash from the entrance passage interrupted them. The skeletal hand had returned, now accompanied by a partial skull that seemed to float in the air behind it, connected by a barely visible spinal column. Up shaft! Now! Petrovich ordered, firing a controlled burst at the apparition. The rounds passed through the spaces between bones, striking sparks off the metal wall behind. Balloony scrambled up the ladder after Harrow. Vasco followed, then Petrovich, firing a final suppressing burst before beginning his climb. The maintenance shaft was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for their shoulders. Their lights illuminated rust-streaked walls and pipework that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. 20 meters up, they encountered the damage Harrow had reported, a section where several rungs had broken away from the wall. I'll brace, Vasco offered, positioning himself across the gap by pressing his back against one wall and feet against the other. Use me as a bridge. Harrow and Balloony carefully climbed past him, using his body as support. When Petrovich reached the position, he hesitated. I'll cover our retreat. You go first, Corporal. Vasco shook his head. With respect, sir, you're needed for mission completion. I can delay them. Below, the scraping sound of bone on metal grew louder. That wasn't a request, Corporal. Something in Petrovich's tone made Vasco nod curtly. He shifted position, allowing the captain to climb past. 3 frag grenades, Vasco said, unclipping them from his vest. Should collapse this section of shaft. Petrovich clasped his shoulder. 30 seconds, then follow. That's an order. Yes, sir. Petrovich climbed to join Harrow and Balloony, who had reached a horizontal service tunnel branching from the shaft. Below, they heard the first grenade detonate, followed by the screech of tearing metal. Vasco's buying us time, Petrovich explained. Balloony, what have you got on the facility layout? The specialist studied his tablet. This tunnel should lead to a secondary monitoring station. Beyond that, an emergency exit to the surface. How far? 200 meters, then up another 60. A second explosion echoed up the shaft, followed almost immediately by the third. Metal fragments pinged against the walls. Move out, Petrovich ordered. Standard formation. They advanced through the service tunnel, which was better maintained than the lower sections. Modern reinforcement had been added to the original Soviet construction, evidence of NATO's repurposing of the facility in the 1990s. Our objective, Harrow realized. The equipment we're here to recover. It's from this facility, isn't it? Petrovich's silence was confirmation enough. What exactly are we retrieving, sir? Balloony asked. Classified acoustic monitoring system, Petrovich finally answered. Installed in 1995 to detect Serbian troop movements through vibration analysis. But that's not all it detected, Balloony guessed. Another explosion, much louder than the grenades, shook the tunnel. Dust and small fragments of concrete rained down from the ceiling. Vasco, Harrow said quietly. Petrovich checked his watch. 40 seconds. He should have been behind us. The tunnel lights flickered as one, an impossibility in a dead power system. Then from below, a familiar sound returned. The whispers, now modulated into a rising and falling pattern, that made their teeth ache and vision blur. "Sound weapon," Balloony gasped, pressing his hands over his ears. That's what they were developing. The whispering shifted pitch, focusing into a directed wave of sound that struck them like a physical force. All three men staggered, disoriented. Harrow dropped to one knee, blood trickling from his left ear. "Keep moving," Petrovich ordered, his own voice sounding distant to his ringing ears. The sound abruptly stopped. In the silence that followed, they heard something new. Footsteps. Heavy military boots on metal flooring, coming up the shaft they'd just left. "Vasco?" Harrow called hopefully. The footsteps continued, measured and unhurried. A light appeared at the junction where the shaft met their tunnel. A figure emerged, Corporal Vasco, apparently unharmed. But he moved with unnatural stiffness, his head slightly cocked to one side. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at nothing. "Corporal, report," Petrovich ordered, raising his rifle slightly. Vasco's mouth opened, but the voice that emerged wasn't his own. Instead, dozens of overlapping whispers spoke through him in perfect unison. "We have been waiting for you." "Vasco, stand down," Petrovich ordered, his rifle trained on the corporal's center mass. His finger hovered outside the trigger guard, not yet committed, but prepared. Vasco's body took another step forward, movements mechanical and disjointed, as though his limbs were being operated by someone unfamiliar with human locomotion. His eyes remained unfocused, pupils dilated to black pools. "We have waited," the chorus of whispers continued through Vasco's mouth, "since the war that never ended." "Which war?" Balloony asked, earning a sharp glance from Petrovich. The possessed corporal's head rotated slightly, too fluid for the human neck's natural range. "All wars, the Great War, the People's War, the Brothers' War, the bones remember what flesh forgets." Harrow had positioned himself behind Petrovich, weapon raised but face taut with conflict. This was still their teammate, possessed or not. "Sir," he murmured, "standard protocols for compromised personnel?" Petrovich kept his focus on Vasco. "Unknown if retrieval is possible. Maintain defensive position, but hold fire. You seek the listening machine," the voices said through Vasco. "The device that heard our song." Balloony's hand moved subtly toward his tablet where the Soviet research files were stored. "Captain, I think I understand. The NATO monitoring equipment. It didn't just detect troop movements. It picked up acoustic anomalies from deeper in the tunnel system. The song woke us," Vasco's body confirmed. "After the long sleep, your machines remembered us." Petrovich made a tactical decision. "What do you want?" "To join, to complete, to sing the final chorus." Vasco's body jerked forward suddenly, covering half the distance between them before stopping. "Your companion resists. His will is unexpected." A tremor passed through Vasco's frame. For a moment, his eyes focused, recognition flooding back. "Captain," he gasped in his own voice, strained and hoarse. "Shoot me. Can't hold it." His body convulsed, back arching unnaturally. A sound emerged from his throat. Not whispers now, but a high, keening note that made the metal walls vibrate in sympathy. "Fall back," Petrovich ordered. "Harrow, flashbang, then retreat to the monitoring station." The lieutenant unclipped a stun grenade, yanked the pin, and tossed it at Vasco's feet in one fluid motion. The team turned away, shielding their eyes. The detonation was deafening in the confined space. When they looked back, Vasco was on his knees, hands pressed against his ears. Blood trickled from his nose and the corners of his eyes. "Go!" Petrovich shouted, pushing his remaining men forward. They sprinted down the service tunnel, guided by Balloony's schematics. Behind them, Vasco's scream transformed mid-note back into that unsettling chorus of whispers. The tunnel terminated at a heavy blast door, partially open. They squeezed through into a monitoring station similar to the main facility, but smaller, purpose-built for a limited mission. banks of equipment lined the walls. Once state-of-the-art acoustic monitoring systems, now obsolete. "Secure the entrance," Petrovich ordered. Harrow and Balloony struggled to force the rusted blast door closed. It moved grudgingly, decades of disuse evident in its protesting hinges. "Sir, this is it," Balloony said once the door was sealed. He indicated a central console with modern NATO equipment patched into the older Soviet systems. The acoustic triangulation array. Petrovich examined the setup. Unlike the decayed Soviet technology, the NATO additions showed only a few years of neglect. A small server unit hummed softly, backup batteries still providing minimal power. "Primary objective located. Prepare for extraction." "Captain," Harrow said from his position by the blast door. "Listen." They fell silent. From beyond the door came not the expected sounds of pursuit, but something more disturbing. Construction noises, scraping, clicking, the grinding of surfaces being fitted together with mechanical precision. "They're building something," Balloony whispered. "Or rebuilding," Petrovich corrected. "How long until extraction is complete?" Balloony examined the server. The data core is accessible, but physical removal will take 10 minutes minimum. There's an encrypted startup sequence. "Work fast. Harrow, find us an exit route." While Balloony tackled the server, Harrow located the emergency shaft that, according to the schematics, led to the surface. "Exit confirmed, sir." Functional ladder system appears intact. A metallic tapping began at the blast door. Deliberate, rhythmic, like someone testing the structural integrity. Then it stopped, replaced by Vasco's voice, unnaturally clear through the thick metal. "Captain Petrovich," it called, now a single voice instead of many. "The corporal wishes to speak with you." Petrovich approached cautiously. "Vasco? You in control?" A pained laugh replied. "Temporarily, they're learning through me, using my knowledge." His voice dropped to a strained whisper. "They know everything I know now. Training, tactics, the mission. Can you break free? Make it to our position?" "Negative. I'm compromised." Vasco's voice caught, then strengthened with resolve. "Sir, you need to understand what they are, what they're doing." "Explain." "They're not a single entity. They're a collective. World War I casualties, civilian deaths, execution victims from the Soviet era, Bosnian War massacres. All of them, thousands, preserved in these tunnels over centuries. Their bones, modified somehow. Modified by what? A wet, choking sound came through the door, followed by heavy breathing. By something older. Something that was here before humans built over it. It uses the dead to communicate, to grow. Each new death adds to its structure. And the sound? The singing? That's how it spreads, how it infects. Vasco's voice grew fainter. The resonance patterns affect brain chemistry. Soviet researchers found ways to use it as a weapon, but they couldn't control it. The rhythmic tapping at the door resumed, now coming from multiple points simultaneously. "They're breaking through," Harrow warned. 8 minutes until extraction complete, Balloony reported. "Vasco," Petrovich called. "Can they be stopped?" A long silence followed. Then Vasco's voice returned, weaker than before. "Fire. It fears fire. Extreme heat disrupts the resonance patterns, destroys whatever connects the bones." He paused, then added with sudden urgency, "Sir, don't let them take me. Use the thermite charges. Burn everything." "Understood," Petrovich replied gravely. "You've served with honor, Corporal." "One last thing," Vasco said, voice suddenly clear. "They're not trying to escape the tunnels. They're trying to reach the surface, to find more material, more bones. They want the city." The tapping stopped. A high, keening note began, the same one they'd heard before, but stronger now, focused like a cutting tool. The metal of the blast door began to vibrate, flakes of rust shaking loose. "They're coming through," Harrow reported, backing away from the door. Petrovich looked to Balloony. "Time? 7 minutes minimum." The captain made his decision. "Prepare alternative extraction. We're setting the thermite charges on a timer. We burn it all. Primary objective located. Prepare for extraction." "Captain," Harrow said from his position by the blast door. "Listen." They fell silent. From beyond the door came not the expected sounds of pursuit, but something more disturbing. Construction noises. Scraping, clicking, the grinding of surfaces being fitted together with mechanical precision. "They're building something," Balloony whispered. "Or rebuilding," Petrovich corrected. "How long until extraction is complete?" Balloony examined the server. The data core is accessible, but physical removal will take 10 minutes minimum. There's an encrypted startup sequence. "Work fast. Harrow, find us an exit route." While Balloony tackled the server, Harrow located the emergency shaft that, according to the schematics, led to the surface. "Exit confirmed, sir." Functional ladder system appears intact. A metallic tapping began at the blast door. Deliberate, rhythmic, like someone testing the structural integrity. Then it stopped, replaced by Vasco's voice, unnaturally clear through the thick metal. "Captain Petrovich," it called, now a single voice instead of many. "The corporal wishes to speak with you." Petrovich approached cautiously. "Vasco? You in control?" A pained laugh replied. "Temporarily, they're learning through me, using my knowledge." His voice dropped to a strained whisper. "They know everything I know now. Training, tactics, the mission. Can you break free? Make it to our position?" "Negative. I'm compromised." Vasco's voice caught, then strengthened with resolve. "Sir, you need to understand what they are, what they're doing." "Explain." "They're not a single entity. They're a collective. World War I casualties, civilian deaths, execution victims from the Soviet era, Bosnian War massacres. All of them, thousands, preserved in these tunnels over centuries. Their bones, modified somehow. Modified by what? A wet, choking sound came through the door, followed by heavy breathing. By something older. Something that was here before humans built over it. It uses the dead to communicate, to grow. Each new death adds to its structure. And the sound? The singing? That's how it spreads, how it infects. Vasco's voice grew fainter. The resonance patterns affect brain chemistry. Soviet researchers found ways to use it as a weapon, but they couldn't control it. The rhythmic tapping at the door resumed, now coming from multiple points simultaneously. "They're breaking through," Harrow warned. 8 minutes until extraction complete, Balloony reported. "Vasco," Petrovich called. "Can they be stopped?" A long silence followed. Then Vasco's voice returned, weaker than before. "Fire. It fears fire. Extreme heat disrupts the resonance patterns, destroys whatever connects the bones." He paused, then added with sudden urgency, "Sir, don't let them take me. Use the thermite charges. Burn everything." "Understood," Petrovich replied gravely. "You've served with honor, Corporal." "One last thing," Vasco said, voice suddenly clear. "They're not trying to escape the tunnels. They're trying to reach the surface, to find more material, more bones. They want the city." The tapping stopped. A high, keening note began, the same one they'd heard before, but stronger now, focused like a cutting tool. The metal of the blast door began to vibrate, flakes of rust shaking loose. "They're coming through," Harrow reported, backing away from the door. Petrovich looked to Balloony. "Time? 7 minutes minimum." The captain made his decision. "Prepare alternative extraction. We're setting the thermite charges on a timer. We burn it all." Thermite placement, Petrovich instructed, unslinging his pack. Critical structural points and the server after data extraction. Timer set for 10 minutes. Harrow retrieved the demolition kit they'd brought for contingencies. How much do we use, sir? All of it. Priority is containment. The high-pitched keening at the blast door intensified. Hairline fractures appeared in the metal, tracing patterns that resembled the bone structures they'd seen in the lower tunnels. Balloony worked frantically at the server console. 5 minutes to complete extraction, he reported, fingers flying across his tablet's interface. Sir, there's something you should know about this data. Relevant to immediate tactical situation? Yes. The monitoring system wasn't just passively recording. It was stimulating something. Regular acoustic pulses directed at the deeper tunnels. Petrovich paused in setting charges. Deliberately? Unknown. But these logs show periodic activation patterns stretching back to initial installation in 1995. Balloony lowered his voice, and signal returns growing stronger each year. They woke it up, Harrow said, placing a thermite pack near the base of a support column, then kept poking it. Or feeding it, Balloony suggested. The resonance may have accelerated whatever process allows the bones to organize. A section of the blast door bulged inward, the metal stretching impossibly like heated plastic. Through the warping surface, they could make out Vasco's silhouette, or something approximating it. Charges at entry point, Petrovich ordered. Prepare for premature detonation if containment fails. Harrow placed their largest thermite charge directly opposite the failing door. Ready, sir. The deforming metal suddenly split with a shriek. Through the gap, they saw not Vasco, but a grotesque parody of human form, a framework of bones arranged in roughly humanoid shape, with Vasco suspended in its center. His eyes were open but unseeing, limbs locked in rigid extension. His ribcage had been forced open, exposing internal organs now threaded with delicate bone fragments. Jesus Christ, Harrow whispered, raising his weapon. Hold, Petrovich commanded. Balloony, status? 4 minutes, cannot accelerate further. The bone construct pushed one jointed appendage through the gap in the door. Unlike the skeletal hand they'd seen earlier, this limb was a complex arrangement of bone fragments from multiple sources. Femurs, vertebrae, finger bones, all interconnected without musculature or ligaments. It's adapting, Balloony realized, using Vasco's knowledge of mechanical engineering to improve its structure. The construct wrenched the gap wider. Vasco's mouth moved, producing that same choral whisper. We remember your wars. Your violence shaped us. Harrow slammed the detonator switch and sprinted after them. The thermite charges ignited with a blinding white flash, instantly heating to over 2,000 degrees Celsius. The bone construct screamed, not with Vasco's voice, but with 1,000 voices layered in discordant agony. The team scrambled up the emergency ladder, the heat from below searing even through their tactical gear. The thermite burned with unrelenting intensity, consuming metal, concrete, and bone with equal veracity. Keep climbing, Petrovich ordered, taking rear position. Below, the monitoring station had become an inferno. The bone construct thrashed in the flames, appendages breaking off and disintegrating as the intense heat disrupted whatever force animated them. Vasco's body, still suspended within the construct's center, hung limply as the bones around him charred and crumbled. His eyes, somehow still visible through the flames, focused one final time. He looked up, meeting Petrovich's gaze, and nodded almost imperceptibly. Then the secondary charges detonated, collapsing the monitoring station floor and dropping the burning remnants into the lower levels. The shaft filled with superheated air, forcing the team to climb faster to escape the rising thermal column. 60 meters to surface, Balloony called down, consulting his tablet one-handed while climbing. Structure appears stable. The ladder rungs grew slick with condensation as they ascended into cooler air. Below, the fires raged, but the screaming had stopped. Only the rumble of collapsing tunnels remained. "Did we get it?" Harrow asked between labored breaths. "Unknown," Petrovich replied. "But we've created a fire break." After 50 meters of climbing, they reached a horizontal service tunnel that, according to Belluni's schematics, led to a surface access point. The air was noticeably fresher, carrying the scent of night air and distant city. They paused, catching their breath. Belluni checked his equipment, confirming the partial data extraction. "I've got approximately 60% of the server contents, sir, enough to piece together what happened. And the monitoring equipment itself? Destroyed with the thermite. Nothing salvageable." Petrovich nodded, satisfied. Secondary objective achieved. Containment prioritized over recovery. Harrow was examining the tunnel ahead. "Surface access appears clear, sir, but there's something you should see." He led them forward to where the tunnel widened. The walls here were different, newer, reinforced with modern materials. And every few meters, embedded in the concrete like macabre decorations, were human bones arranged in familiar patterns. "These aren't old," Harrow noted, touching one cautiously. "This is recent construction." Belluni examined the patterns. These match designs from the deepest tunnels, but they're incomplete, as if someone was experimenting, trying to replicate the original structures. Sound baffles, Petrovich realized. They were containing acoustic transmission, preventing whatever was down there from communicating with the surface. A distant rumble shook the tunnel, dust filtering down from the ceiling. The thermite charges were still burning, collapsing more of the facility beneath them. "We need to move," Petrovich decided. Complete extraction and deliver the data package. As they continued toward the surface exit, Harrow asked the question weighing on all their minds. "Sir, if NATO was containing this thing, why send us to recover equipment that was monitoring it? Why not just leave it buried?" Petrovich's expression darkened. "That's above our pay grade, Lieutenant." But the carbon-dated files in Belluni's tablet would later reveal a disturbing truth. The monitoring system hadn't just been observing the bone entity, it had been learning from it. The surface access point terminated at a maintenance shed disguised as an abandoned utility building on the outskirts of Sarajevo. The structure's exterior was weather-worn and covered with graffiti, but the reinforced door had held secure for decades. "Breach and clear, standard protocol," Petrovich ordered as they reached the final ladder section. Harrow ascended first, weapons ready. He cracked the hatch, swept his light through the opening, then pushed it fully open. "Clear, sir." The team emerged into a concrete room filled with obsolete electrical equipment, convincing camouflage for its true purpose. Moonlight filtered through dust-covered windows, casting long shadows across the floor. 0242 hours, Petrovich noted, checking his watch. "Rendezvous with extraction team at 0400. Gives us time to secure the perimeter and prepare the data package." Belluni was already transferring information from his tablet to a secure NATO communications module. "Sir, I've been analyzing the partial data we recovered. There's something you need to see." He pulled up a series of acoustic waveform recordings, each labeled with dates stretching back to 1995. These show the evolution of the entity's communication patterns. They started as random noise, but over time became more structured, more complex. "They were learning," Harrow said, securing the perimeter with practiced efficiency. "Yes, but not just learning. Look at this." Belluni displayed a parallel set of data. These are the NATO monitoring system's own transmissions, regular acoustic pulses sent into the tunnel system, initially described as calibration signals. Petrovich studied the patterns. They match. Exactly. The monitoring system was mimicking the entity's signals, then sending back variations, like teaching it to communicate. The implications hung in the air between them. Harrow voiced what they were all thinking. Someone wanted to talk to that thing, to understand it. Or to use it, Petrovich said grimly. A soft beep from Balloony's communications module interrupted them. Signal established with NATO command. Transmitting data package now. His fingers hesitated over the screen. Sir, should we include everything? Petrovich considered the question. Standard protocol required complete reporting, but his instincts warned against sharing the full extent of what they'd discovered. Transmit technical data only. We'll deliver full analysis in person. Understood. Balloony adjusted the transmission parameters. Harrow, maintaining watch at a window, suddenly stiffened. Movement outside, southeast perimeter. Petrovich joined him, peering through the grimy glass. In the moonlight, a figure stood motionless on the road leading to the shed, a solitary silhouette too distant to identify. Civilian? Balloony suggested. At this hour, in this location? Unlikely. Petrovich raised his night vision optics. Cannot confirm identity, no weapons visible. The figure began walking toward the shed with unnatural steadiness, each step precisely measured. Similar movement pattern to Vasco when compromised, Harrow observed quietly. Impossible, Balloony said. We collapsed the tunnels. Burned everything. We burned one section, Petrovich corrected. If these tunnel systems extend throughout the region as your data suggests. He didn't need to finish the thought. The figure continued its approach, now close enough to make out details. Civilian clothes, male, middle-aged, local, based on appearance. But the eyes, even at this distance, they could see the vacancy in them. Sir, Harrow said, there's more. From side streets and alleys, additional figures emerged. 5, then 12, then more. All walking with that same measured gait, all converging on the shed. They found another way out, Balloony whispered. Used a different host. Or hosts, Petrovich amended. Exactly as Vasco warned, they're spreading to the surface. The communications module chimed, indicating successful transmission. At the same sound, all the approaching figures stopped in unison, heads turning toward the shed with mechanical precision. They can hear that, Balloony realized. They're sensitive to electronic signals. Petrovich made a rapid tactical assessment. How long until extraction team arrives? 78 minutes, sir. Too long. We need immediate exfiltration. He activated his emergency beacon, a last resort that would bring rapid response but compromise operational secrecy. Prepare for defensive positions. Use non-lethal force if possible. These may be civilians. And if they're not? Harrow asked. Before Petrovich could answer, the first figure reached the shed's outer door. It made no attempt to open it, instead pressing its forehead against the metal surface. A low, vibrating hum began, the same note they'd heard in the tunnels, but focused now, directed. The metal door began to resonate in response, the frequency matching exactly. Dust particles danced in the air, vibrating in geometric patterns. They're using acoustic resonance to weaken the structure, Balloony explained, watching in horrified fascination, like an opera singer shattering glass. More figures joined the first, each adding their voice to the harmonic assault. The door's hinges began to shake, metal fatigue spreading visibly across the surface. Barricade the inner door, Petrovich ordered. Harrow, prepare flashbangs. If sound is their weapon, we fight with the same. They quickly fortified their position, dragging equipment to block the entrance. Balloony continued monitoring his instruments, which now displayed erratic readings. Sir, the resonance pattern is changing. It's becoming more complex, more directed. Outside, the humming shifted into a multi-layered chorus, the same whispering voices they'd heard below ground, but amplified through dozens of human conduits. The shed's windows began to vibrate, hairline cracks spreading across the glass. They're not just trying to get in, Balloony said suddenly. They're trying to communicate. With who? Harrow demanded. with the monitoring equipment, or rather, what's left of it in our data package. Petrovich turned to him sharply. Explain. The NATO system wasn't just recording them, it was designed to receive and interpret their acoustic language. That's why they want the data we recovered. It contains the translation algorithms. The outer door's metal began to warp, bending inward like the blast door had done below. Through the distortion, they could make out countless faces pressed against the surface, mouths moving in perfect synchronization. Can you corrupt the data? Petrovich asked. Make it unusable? Balloony shook his head. Already transmitted to command, but I can modify what remains here. His fingers moved across his tablet, altering code sequences. I'm introducing random patterns into the translation matrix. If they access it, they'll receive gibberish. A section of the outer door tore free with a screech of metal. Arms reached through, dozens of them, human in appearance but moving with that same unsettling coordination. Command confirms emergency extraction, Petrovich announced, checking his tactical display. Helicopter inbound, ETA 12 minutes. We hold this position. Harrow readied his flashbangs. Sir, if these are civilians, they're still hostiles. Rules of engagement? Petrovich's jaw tightened. Protect the data. Protect the team. Minimal force when possible. The first figure squeezed through the damaged door, a middle-aged man with empty eyes and blood trickling from his ears. His mouth moved, producing that same whispering chorus. We will have what is ours, the voices said through him. The key to your world. Flash out, Harrow shouted, tossing the first stun grenade through the breach. The team turned away, shielding their eyes as the device detonated with a blinding flash and concussive blast. The possessed civilians staggered back, their coordinated movements momentarily disrupted. Their whispered chorus faltered, becoming discordant as the acoustic pattern broke. It's working, Balloony observed. The resonance is sensitive to interruption. Petrovich seized the tactical advantage. Harrow, deploy sonic deterrent. The lieutenant activated a high-frequency acoustic disruptor, standard NATO crowd control technology. The device emitted a directional pulse that caused intense discomfort without permanent damage. The possessed civilians clutched their heads, their synchronized movements dissolving into individual spasms. Several dropped to their knees, mouths open in silent agony. But the effect was temporary. Already, those at the perimeter were regaining their unnatural coordination. They're adapting, Balloony warned, modifying their resonance to counteract our frequency. Through the breach, more civilians pressed forward, climbing over their fallen comrades with single-minded determination. Their whispers rebuilt into harmony, now modulated to exclude the disruptor's frequency. Extraction ETA 9 minutes, Petrovich noted. We need to secure the roof for pickup. The shed's layout included a maintenance access to the roof, a metal ladder bolted to the rear wall leading to a hatch. Harrow deployed another flashbang to cover their movement as they retreated toward the ladder. Wait, Balloony said suddenly, staring at his tablet. Something's wrong with the data package. Explain, Petrovich demanded, covering their position with controlled bursts from his rifle, aimed at the floor to deter rather than wound. It's being accessed, remotely. Balloony's fingers flew across the screen. Someone from within NATO's secure network is extracting specific components of the acoustic translation matrix. Command authorized? Negative. This is a targeted breach using command authentication but accessing only the entity communication protocols. Balloony looked up, face pale. Someone wants to talk to these things, to control them. The revelation hung for only a moment before the tactical situation demanded their attention. The possessed civilians had breached the inner barricade, flowing into the room with coordinated purpose. Their eyes remained vacant, but their movements had become more fluid, more efficient, as though they were learning with each passing minute. Roof access now, Petrovich ordered. Harrow, rear guard. As Balloony ascended the ladder, tablet secured in his pack, the lieutenant deployed their remaining flashbangs in a staggered sequence. The multiple detonations disoriented the pursuing civilians, buying precious seconds. Petrovich followed Balloony, then covered Harrow's ascent. The three men emerged onto the flat roof of the maintenance shed, immediately sweeping the area for threats. The helicopter's distant thrum was barely audible, still minutes away. "Perimeter secure," Harrow reported, "but we've got more hostiles approaching from the north and east." Through his night vision, Petrovich counted at least 30 additional figures converging on their position. Men, women, even teenagers, all moving with that same mechanical precision. "They're drawing from the entire neighborhood," Balloony realized, using civilians as proxies. Below, the possessed had reached the roof access ladder. They climbed with disturbing coordination, forming a human chain that moved like a single organism. "Sir," Harrow said quietly, "these aren't combatants. Standard ROE prohibits lethal force against civilian population, even when compromised." "Understood, Lieutenant." Petrovich surveyed their limited options. The roof offered no cover, only the elevated position. Physical deterrence only. Incapacitate without permanent injury. The first possessed civilian pulled himself onto the roof, a young man no older than 20, blood now streaming from his ears and nose. His eyes, though vacant, fixed on Balloony's pack containing the data. "The key," the chorus whispered through him. "Give us the key to your world." More civilians emerged onto the roof, surrounding the team in a slowly tightening circle. They moved in perfect unison, as though controlled by a single mind. 7 minutes to extraction, Petrovich noted. "Hold position." Harrow used his rifle as a physical barrier, pushing back the approaching figures without firing. Balloony had taken a defensive stance, clearly struggling with the moral implications of harming innocent people being used as puppets. The possessed suddenly halted their advance. In perfect synchronization, they tilted their heads as if listening to a distant sound. Then, as one, they spoke. "Command understands. Command will integrate. We will have form beyond bone." Balloony's tablet chimed an alert. "Sir," he said, voice tight with alarm, "the secure channel to NATO Command just received a transmission. They're acknowledging receipt of the full acoustic translation protocols." "From who?" Petrovich demanded. "Unknown source within the network. Security clearance. Ultra." Balloony looked up, eyes wide. Someone with top-level access just gave them everything they need to communicate. To be understood. The possessed civilians stepped back, forming a perfect circle around the team. Their whispering changed, becoming a rhythmic chant that vibrated through the night air. The pattern was different from the aggressive resonance they'd used before. More structured, almost formal. "What are they doing?" Harrow asked, maintaining his defensive position. "Sending a message," Balloony replied, watching his instruments. "Not to us. Through us. They're using our communications equipment as a relay." The helicopter's distinctive thrum grew louder, approaching from the west. Standard extraction protocol would have the pilot maintain communication silence until visual confirmation of the team. "To who?" Petrovich pressed. Before Balloony could answer, the possessed civilians began to convulse. One by one, they collapsed to the roof, bodies shaking violently. Blood poured from their ears, noses, and eyes, their biological forms overwhelmed by the resonance they were channeling. "They're burning out their hosts," Balloony said in horror, using them as sacrificial transmitters. The last civilian fell, the chorus fading to silence. In the sudden quiet, the helicopter's approach seemed unnaturally loud. "Extraction on schedule," Petrovich confirmed, watching the aircraft's lights appear on the horizon. "Prepare for immediate departure." Harrow checked the fallen civilians, finding weak pulses in most. They're alive, but need immediate medical attention. "We'll alert emergency services once airborne," Petrovich decided. As the helicopter approached, its searchlight sweeping the area, Balloony stared at his tablet with growing dread. "Sir," he said, barely audible over the rotor wash, "I've decoded part of their transmission. It wasn't directed at NATO command." "Then who?" Balloony looked up as the helicopter hovered above them, its powerful downdraft whipping debris across the roof. It was an acknowledgement, a response to instructions. He swallowed hard. Someone has been in contact with them all along. Someone who wants what they have. The helicopter touched down, crew chief signaling for immediate boarding. As they rushed toward the aircraft, Petrovich cast one final glance at the fallen civilians, innocent vessels for something ancient and patient that had found new allies in the modern world. The bone choir had been awakened, and someone was listening. "Please state your name and rank for the record." "Captain Luka Petrovich, NATO Engineering Corps, Special Recovery Unit." "Captain, this debriefing is classified ultra. Nothing discussed leaves this room." The recording device blinked red in the center of the table. 3 officers faced Petrovich, a brigadier general he recognized, and 2 intelligence officials he did not. The room was sparse, windowless, deep within NATO headquarters in Brussels. "Understood, sir." "Your after-action report regarding Operation Black Quarry contains several inconsistencies, specifically regarding the loss of Corporal Vasco and the civilian casualties in Sarajevo." Petrovich maintained his composure. "My report is accurate, sir." The general slid a folder across the table. "Medical examinations of the affected civilians show unprecedented neural damage. 26 survivors, all exhibiting identical symptoms: auditory processing disruption, memory loss, and unusual brainwave patterns during sleep." "And the 3 who didn't survive?" Petrovich asked. "Autopsies revealed calcification of the inner ear structures, bone growth of unknown origin." The general's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held something Petrovich couldn't quite interpret. "Their families have been compensated. Official cause: exposure to industrial chemicals from abandoned Soviet-era storage." One of the intelligence officers leaned forward. "Captain, the acoustic data your team recovered has been analyzed. Most was corrupted beyond recovery in the transmission process." "A lie." Petrovich knew Balloony had transmitted the complete data package. He said nothing. "What remains," the officer continued, "suggests an advanced acoustic technology developed by the Soviets, not the anomalous phenomenon described in your verbal report. With respect, sir, what we encountered wasn't technology." "Corporal Vasco's remains were never recovered," the general noted. "Yet you've certified his death." "He died in the line of duty, sir. No remains were recoverable." The second intelligence officer, who had remained silent until now, placed a small device on the table. When activated, it emitted a low-frequency hum, a signal jammer blocking all possible surveillance. "Off the record, Captain," he said quietly. "How far had it spread?" Petrovich hesitated, measuring his response. "Beyond the tunnel system, into the local population, temporarily at least." "And the transmission your specialist detected?" "Directed to someone within our secure network, ultra clearance level." The 3 officers exchanged glances. "Lieutenant Harrow has been reassigned to NATO's Northern Command," the general said abruptly. "Specialist Balloony has accepted a research position with our Acoustic Warfare Division. Both have been thoroughly debriefed." The unspoken message was clear. His team had been separated, their knowledge compartmentalized. "And my next assignment, sir?" The general closed the folder. "You're being promoted to major, effective immediately. You'll oversee a new containment initiative, Operation Silent Valley." "Containment of what exactly?" Instead of answering, the general slid across another folder, this one bearing classification markers Petrovich had never seen before. 3 similar incidents have been documented in former conflict zones. Bosnia isn't unique, Major. just the most recent manifestation. Petrovich opened the folder. The first page showed a satellite image of a remote mountain region in Afghanistan. The second, subsurface scanning data from Ukraine. The third, autopsy reports from Rwanda with photographs that made his blood run cold. "The bone choir," he said quietly. "We prefer acoustic anomaly," the intelligence officer corrected. "Your experience makes you uniquely qualified to manage this situation." "And if I decline?" The general's expression hardened. "That option isn't available, Major." As Petrovich left the debriefing room, his new security credentials heavy in his pocket, he couldn't shake the memory of Vasco's final words. "They want the city. They want more bones." Somewhere beneath Sarajevo, in tunnels they had failed to fully collapse, the whispering continued, and someone was still listening.